Welcome everyone to Webinar Wednesdays. Thank you for joining us today. I'm June Rawl. Before we get started, I wanted to pause to express our heartfelt thoughts to the victims of Las Vegas, their families, and really all of us affected by this terrible act of violence. It's definitely been a tough start to this academic year. Well, today's webinar is titled Putting Manipulatives to Work. It's facilitated by Ronald Cruz. You know, we talk a lot about differentiated instruction. Well, one method to differentiate your instruction is to incorporate the use of manipulatives. Manipulative use is recommended as a good strategy because it's supported by learning theory and educational research. During this webinar, you'll have the opportunity to explore new uses for manipulatives, as well as look at new tools to add to your mathematical toolkit. Ron will go over the importance and benefits of the use of manipulatives and show you how it aligns to our Florida curriculum standards. We'll also share with you some resources from the IPDAY website that will assist you in implementing the use of manipulatives in your classroom. Well, enjoy the webinar. I'm going to turn it over to Ron, and we'll get started with putting manipulatives to work. Ron?
Thank you very much, June. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in, spending a precious an hour of your afternoon to learn a little bit more about manipulatives. Manipulatives has been very popular, especially in the past face-to-face workshops we've conducted. One of those is the CCRS, or the College and Career Readiness Standards Workshop, which we embellished with a ton of manipulative activities and strategies for you. This webinar could serve as a standalone webinar that you can use to review or to learn more about manipulatives, or it could be a follow-up information for you to apply those that you have learned in the previous College and Career Readiness Standards Workshop. My name is Ronald Cruz. I am from the Hillsborough County Public Schools. I'm the coordinator of the Caribe Refugee Program. And I'm also a statewide trainer and facilitator for ABE, GED, and ESOL through the Florida IPDAY. I just wanted to give you a quick reminder right before I get started with the agenda for this for this webinar, that if you have any questions, you can always click on the Q&A bar or tab on your control panel, and then a window will appear, and it will allow you to type in your question. I will be able to see your question. June and also Joseph Reed on the background are addressing some of the technical issues you may be having while we're having this webinar, so they will be answering your questions through the Q&A tab. Your microphones will be muted, and you will be only in listen mode, so if you have any questions or comments, feel free to use that tab. And we'll make sure that we look at all the pertinent questions and comments that you have. This presentation is going to be recorded, and it will be archived in your IPDAY website when you go into the IPDAY website, and I'll show you later on how to access the archived webinar as we go through this webinar. Okay. So let's start off with the agenda. We're going to talk about manipulatives today, give you some information on what are the different types of manipulatives available to you, why do we use the manipulatives, and when is the best time to really use these manipulatives. Some teachers just use manipulatives just because they wanted to change things up. Well, manipulatives use has to be purposeful in your classroom. It has to align with your instructional objective. Manipulatives in the standards and framework item that's listed in our agenda. This is what I'm going to talk about, how manipulatives is kind of like outlined in your curriculum frameworks, also in the College and Career Readiness Standards. I'm also going to give you a little brief demonstration on virtual manipulatives in mathematics. I'm going to give you a tour of the National Library of Virtual Mathematics, also show you the mathlearningcenter.org, where you can access a ton of web apps and online manipulatives that you can use with your students. And then lastly, we're going to talk about IPDAY resources that align with the use of manipulatives, and later on some reminders on some reminders for teachers as to when you're using the manipulatives, some key ideas for you to remember. and then we'll address some of your questions before we do our final evaluation for this webinar. So let's talk about different types of manipulatives. You see something in your picture right here. It may look a little bit more elementary to you, but I guarantee you, your students will really appreciate the use of manipulatives. It's not like, it doesn't convey somewhat of a playful or fun time of activity. It's more like understanding the concepts for them. And these are some of the concrete objects and tools that you can use as manipulatives. So some of them are colored counters, some of them are play money, shapes, fraction tiles. Geosolids is also very popular for a lot of students that are having some difficulty with spatial reasoning and spatial recognition. And also talking about the different tiles, the fraction tiles, the circle tiles that talks about different parts of the whole. GeoBoard is also very popular to a lot of our students since it allows them to explore different geometric shapes and also identify different types of properties that of each individual shape. We also can look at so a lot of teachers use a lot of these boards, these graphing boards. You can buy these boards that already have the grid lines on them. You can also purchase die cut boards from Home Depot, and they will cut them for you to a size that you want. And then what I normally do is I use a permanent marker to kind of draw the outlines for these small boards. But students enjoy using the small boards a lot, just because they are very versatile. Not only can you use them for drawing geometry, you can also use them for graphing, understanding functions, and analyzing functions. You can also use them in statistics, just like the one that you're seeing in the picture right now. On the small board, they have drawn a bar graph in there. So students can draw statistical data or organize or represent statistical data in various formats using these small boards. Colored counters is very popular when you're talking about integers, when you're adding, subtracting, multiplying, not so much dividing integers, but it shows the students how and why the signs change depending on the value of the numbers that are being added, subtracted, or multiplied. Dice, tape measures, those are two other objects that we can use in our classroom. Dice is very popular when you're teaching probability and odds to your students. And tape measures, we just need to just show the students how to measure. Some students do not have an idea how long a foot is or how long a mile is. And if they have an idea of what these lengths are, they can easily check for reasonableness in their answers when they're working with word problems. So these are the different types that we have right now. We also have the balance. A lot of teachers use the balance not only for understanding volume and also weight, but also teachers use the balance to solve equations, just like when we use them for algebra tiles. And then some more clocks and spinners are used for, again, probability. Elapsed time is one of the areas where students really struggle a lot. They live in a very digital world, and understanding the time difference between, let's say, 9:30 in the morning to 4:45 in the afternoon, students find it very difficult to find the elapsed time between the starting time and the end time. So having a clock in your classroom that they can manipulate will help them understand will help them understand elapsed time. Thermometer is good for measurement. It's also I use thermometers to reinforce integers, adding and subtracting integers with my students. And then number lines. Number lines is really, really popular, especially during our college and career readiness face-to-face workshops. We've discovered in these workshops that number lines are used in a variety of situations, not just understanding the number system, but also understanding percents, decimals, operations with percents, or finding the percentages of something. And then if you double the number line and you put them side by side, you can even explore other mathematical operations such as proportional reasoning or completing a proportion. And then again, circles. Circles is one of the items in the GED test that students struggle a lot. A lot of the things that involve circle or have a circular part, such as a cone or a sphere or a cylinder. Students are having a difficult time working through those word problems. So having circles and using manipulatives that that uses these geosolids and circles would help students visualize these problems a little bit better. And manipulatives does not have to be a physical object. Just like I said, there are a ton of websites out there that gives you the power to access virtual manipulatives. One of the most popular ones that we've talked about in all of our face-to-face workshops are the National Library of Virtual Mathematics apps. And I just took a snippet of that website and showed you that for every grade level or for every NRS level in adult education, there are several, like at least 20 apps that you can use. Some of the more popular ones that I like the most is the Grapher. And then also the function machine allows the student to understand a little bit more on patterns. And then what I use the most during the ABE workshops or the College and Career Readiness workshop are the Math Learning Center web apps, the Fraction app, the GeoBoard app, and the Numberline app. We do have also corresponding grab and go videos that go along with this. If it's your first time using a GeoBoard and a Numberline, we do have grab and go videos that gives you a step-by-step quick 3-minute video on how to use that in adding and subtracting or multiplying fractions. Just like I said, manipulatives do not have to be something that you purchase out of the store. Manipulatives can also be real life objects that you use in every day. You know, sometimes I would bring a can of soda just to show my students what a cylinder looks like. And then we compute the volume of the can of soda and compare that with a volume, let's say, of a 1 liter of soda. So those are the types of things that I bring to my classroom so that students can visualize and they're not just always looking at a picture or a two-dimensional drawing that I draw on the board. Why do we use manipulatives? That's the bigger question, right? The reason why I find it very successful for my class, for my students, and for my class when I taught ABE and GED. But mathematics is the lowest performing area. And one of the things that students struggle the most is that when they read a word problem, they don't understand exactly what the problem is asking for, or they don't cannot visualize what the word problem is talking about. So manipulatives gives the students that outlet. You know, not on the actual test, but if you use manipulatives in teaching how to solve these word problems, students can remember how they work through those manipulatives, which will give them a clue or a strategy to solve the word problem. Mathematics reasoning also spans other subject areas such as science and social studies, and when they do, they're always represented in real life objects that could always be represented by a manipulative. Another greatest challenge for the student is that a lot of the mathematical concepts that we teach are very abstract, such as the concept of a function. Students cannot visualize what's going on. What is a function? What does it do? Why does it relate to a graph? Using a manipulative, using a function machine helps students understand that a function really does something to that number that they put on the input and spits out another number and an output. And then for every one input, there has to be a unique output. So the students as my students work through the function machine, they slowly understand and visualize and internalize what functions are, so that when they encounter these questions and these vocabulary words in the GED test, they can easily relate and understand what those meant. And then lastly, just like what June talked about at the beginning of this webinar, manipulatives is one of the best ways for you to differentiate your instruction. Not every student learned the same way, so we can differentiate by the process by which students learn, by allowing students to use the manipulatives.
Ron?
Yes.
Dana is serving in, she works in a correction facility. So she has a question about, is there a website where you can print manipulatives like fraction bars? Because, you know, working in a correction facility, they don't have access to websites and apps and stuff like that.
Thank you very much.
You must be
okay,
very careful.
Great question. Great question, Dana. I have two suggestions for you. A lot of the, when you go in and you want to access the website of the National Library of Virtual Mathematics, when you go into that website, which I'm going to give you the link in a little bit, you can go in there and actually request for a CD version, which you can load independently into your computer at the correction facility, and you do not need internet access in order to run those programs. So that's one suggestion. Another suggestion is, yes, there are, if you just type into Google fraction bars and you click on, let's say, images, it will show you templates that other teachers have already created that you can print, laminate, and make copies, or as many copies as you want for your students. So one of the two ways, you can request a CD version of all of these manipulatives, or you can go in and do a general Google search for any particular manipulative you want. Make sure you click on the images tab, and then that's gonna show what other teachers have created, so you can either kind of preview how it looks and see, it's like, oh, this is such, it uses so much paper, so I don't want this one, or this one is too it's too elementary for my students, I need a different template. So I do not have any particular suggestion for you, but if you just Google yourself, there are a ton of manipulative templates that other teachers have already created that you can just steal. So June and I have this motto, CASE method. It's called copy and steal everything. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you, June, for bringing up that question.
Yeah, and Ron, also we have a lot of resources on the IPDAY website, and if they find difficulty in getting them, just reach out to us and we'll send them your way.
Awesome, yes. All right, let's turn it over now. That it's a really good segue that Dana asked that question, because this time I'm gonna throw back the question to all of you. Have you been using manipulatives already in the classroom? For those of you who have attended the College and Career Readiness Workshop where you received your own manipulatives kit, how did you use the manipulatives in your classroom? When did you use it? So use the Q&A bar to kind of type in your comments and your responses, and then we'll read some of those. All right. Well, I have Miss Jones has shared with us that she uses manipulatives every week, and the more you use the manipulatives, it's just better for your students in understanding the concept that you're teaching. So great job. Thank you for sharing that, Miss Jones. Okay, another thing. Okay, I want to read through what Ms. Lewandowski has just shared with us. This is what she said. We are studying circles, cylinders, and different formulas relating to them. I am using a toilet paper tube, soaking the tube in water, and showing how another shape forms the cylinder. This can move through several different vocabulary terms and into the higher math. Very good. Great job. Just like I told you, excuse me, that you do not have to purchase an actual geosolid. You can use everyday materials for your manipulatives. So very great job, Ms. Lewandowski. Susan also shared with us that she's using the number line to teach integers. I found that I have a very biased view of the number line. I always use the number line in teaching a lot of the concepts in mathematics, not just in teaching integers, even in fractions. I use the number line when we're doing operations. The more they understand about the number line, the better number sense your students have, and a greater number sense just allows them to double check their answers frequently in order to check for reasonableness. Great job. Miss Day says she's using bottle caps as counters for multiplication. Great job. Not only are you helping save the planet by eliminating a lot of solid waste, but you're also using these bottle caps. They're very useful, and they all look the same. So great job. It's really good suggestion that you shared that with us. And Ms. Carr has said she has used geometric solids when doing volume and surface area. Right. Students cannot visualize and understand the formula for volume and surface area unless you show them the actual solid. Showing that example of a cylinder and example of a sphere, and what is the radius they're talking about, what is the circumference that they're talking about that appears in that formula. If students don't know what those are, then they will not be able to effectively use these formulas. Thank you. Keep your comments coming in. We're going to read them again at another point in time in this webinar to get a lot more of your ideas with the use of manipulatives. As we move on, I just want to talk about another thing. When you use manipulatives, what I really suggest you do is not to allow your students to become very, very dependent on the use of manipulatives. Please remember that the use of manipulatives is to strengthen their foundation, is to strengthen their conceptual understanding of the mathematical processes that you're teaching them. So you start with the concrete use of the manipulatives, use of the bottle caps, use of the tissue paper rolls, the use of the geosolids. That's the beginning part when you're always introducing a new concept, a new mathematics vocabulary, a new procedure, a new algorithm. You want to use the manipulatives at that point in time. And then as the students learn more and become more proficient with that subject matter or with that particular skill you're trying to teach, you want to move them from that concrete or away from the manipulatives to a more representational, where they are only drawing in the sheet of papers and or illustrating what they're visualizing. The reason why is because when students takes the TABE test or the GED test, they do not have the help of these manipulatives to help them and guide them through the word problems. So you have to move the students from the concrete or from the manipulatives to a more representational. Of course, the ultimate goal and our end goal here is for students to be able to reason more abstractly, whereas they do not rely anymore with the use of pictures and graphs and objects in order to visualize a math problem. Everything is happening mentally, and that's where we want to move their students through this experiential learning. So let's talk a little bit more. So I'm going to go back and look at your comments, but this time share with me. I want to hear about how your students responded with the use of manipulatives. How do they like it? Are they learning from it? Was it frustrating to you? Do you find it? Find the use of manipulatives taking a lot out of your effort as a teacher, or taking a lot of your planning time? So share with me that experience so we can address those questions and needs. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to and take a look at some of the other people, other teachers' comments that they put in here. All right, very good. So just like I said, Miss Josephine Day has continued to comment on the use of manipulatives in the corrections. Coloring templates, yes, that's correct. Coloring the templates that you find online. A lot of the templates that you will find online are usually blackline masters or in black and white. So you can use and print them and color them. And for your students to understand these objects and these manipulatives. Miss Amato shared with us that she uses dice for probability. One of the most common things that the students are very familiar with dice because because not only they see that online a lot, they've used that when we're playing board games and things like that. So they're very familiar with dice. Try to elevate the level of understanding of probability by comparing the probabilities using a single-sided die. Using a six-sided die, and then using two six-sided dice. Also exploring the ideas of mutually exclusive probability or dependent probabilities or conditional probabilities. Miss Gloria Butts, she's talking about manipulatives as being displayed throughout her classroom. A yardstick, foot rulers, number lines, geometric solids, hexagram, weights, decimal lines, maps, tapped out square roots on the floor tiles. I can't help myself, she said. Perhaps it's the elementary degree, but guess what, Miss Butts? Your elementary degree is really, really helping your students understand and visualize the mathematics. They will not have any problem working through a word problem that uses any of these concepts. The more they see a yardstick, the more they see a ruler or a number line, the more they can abstractly think what's going on when we're subtracting a negative number from another negative number. Or let's say the concept of an absolute value. Those are concepts that our students are having a difficult time visualizing because they don't have an actual object to cling on to. Ms. Janai Jones talked about using shapes. Similar to the tangrams, but they use those shapes in adding and subtracting fractions. Great job, Miss Jones. There are a lot of things on YouTube that I've discovered that other teachers have created, very novelty shapes and also techniques that students can use in the use of manipulatives. Ms. Shannon Allen asked a question that if the CD is being sent directly to the teacher to an educational source. Okay, right. Okay, so she's talking about when you order the CDs from the National Library of Virtual Mathematics. They're not necessarily going to send it to your correctional facility. If you have a central warehouse that you can have it delivered, or where you have a central supply warehouse where all deliveries are sent to, because security is very tight at the correctional facility. So that's where you wanted to have it sent to, and then that's where you wanted to be claimed. Ms. Jones is talking about a difficulty with the use of the manipulatives because she would have rather just explain the concepts and have students figure out on their own. And I know that teachers are very control freaks, and so as Ms. Jones, she shared in here. And she talked about, allowing the students to just explore and illustrate on their own. You're going to figure out that as I go through with some of the suggestions here on how to use the manipulatives, you will learn that you don't have to give them everything, that your students, if you use it every day, if you use it on a consistent basis, your students would normally gravitate to some of these manipulatives to kind of help themselves understand what you're explaining. So you don't have to always demonstrate the use of manipulatives. You can have the students do them for you if it's pretty much taking a lot of your time, or it's taking away some of the control that you have as a teacher. All right. So another thing that I want to move on a little bit because I want to demonstrate some of these things to you. But before I do that, I want to just stress out some of the ways that the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics have expressed how you be using these manipulatives, or what are they effective for. So first, just like some of the examples that you all already have shared with me, is sorting. When you're sorting, sorting and ordering are very low-level mathematical skills. You can teach that and teach those skills at your beginning levels of ABE. Distinguishing patterns. So when you're trying to allow your students, because pattern recognition also appears, it was very predominant in the old version of the GED test, the 2002 version. but the new version now is a more complex type of pattern, not so much as what National Council of Teachers of Mathematics is talking about, but it builds the foundations for understanding more complex mathematical patterns when you start with manipulatives with patterns. Recognizing geometric shapes is one way. When I say a rhombus, how is a rhombus different from a parallelogram? Do your students really know? I usually hand out and give out either a laminated piece of geoboard if I'm working with students that cannot control themselves with the use of rubber bands. But sometimes I would hand them the real geoboard and say, "Go ahead and illustrate to me two similar triangles." And then I ask the students to develop the definition of similarity by explaining to me using the geoboard. So that becomes a very powerful conversation between me and the class, because now I'm not just telling them the definition of similarity. They are the ones explaining to me and to their classmates why they think two shapes are similar. Making measurements, just like what you all have said, having a yardstick, having a meter stick, having a tape measure in the classroom, or even just rulers, allow the students to understand and really have some perspective on the various lengths, various shapes and volumes that we often or frequently discover or explore or think about in mathematics. Base 10 numbers is another way to use manipulatives when you're trying to teach them the base 10 numbers. I know some of our students, well, actually, a lot of our students are very proficient with base 10 numbers. That's one of the multiplication facts that they always master first. So I don't find this one of the things that we have to really focus on as adult educators. Mathematics operations, we've already talked about that with the use of colored counters or bottle caps. Relationships among mathematical operations can be done either with a number line or a coordinate grid or your small boards. Spatial relationships, we talked about that with the geosolids. Symmetry, I teach symmetry a lot with the use of a geoboard, but just so you know, you can just simply draw on an XY axis or coordinate system to illustrate symmetry to your students. Spatial memory, this is one of the things that I really wanted to develop when I use the different pattern blocks and pattern shapes and the different geosolids to my students. I want them to have that spatial memory. When I say a cone, they know exactly what it looks like. That it has a height, it has a base in the shape of a circle. When I say it's a square pyramid, the students must be able to kind of see that right away. That, okay, how do I find the height? Can I use the Pythagorean theorem to determine that height? What other dimensions of the pyramid should I have to have in order to determine that height? So those types of questions are easily understood and solved when students have a very good spatial memory. Transformations, we do that a lot. That's very popular with the use of the geoboard. And also engaging in problem solving. If I can have, sometimes in the class, you give them 10 word problems and it's like they complain so much because it's like it's too much work and it's not as fun to do. But if I give them, let's say, 5 word problems and then hand them a set of manipulatives appropriate to those problems, students find it easier to work through those problems, and they find it enjoyable. They find word problem solving as an enjoyable activity for them because they feel like they're solving a puzzle rather than working out a word problem. So a lot of these ideas have been shared, and I took them from the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, which they have a ton of materials too that talks about how you can use manipulatives in the classroom. They really support the use of manipulatives in the class because it's a research-backed strategy that shows and increases understanding of mathematical concepts for students. So let's look at our standards real quick, because if you look at the standards for the college and career readiness standards, the mathematical practices reinforce, and it's kind of like if you read between the lines, it kind of tells you that manipulatives is one of the best way to address these mathematical practices, such as making sense and persevering in solving math problems. Persevering in solving math problems will include drawing the problem, and if they're used to visualizing the problems using the manipulatives, they can easily draw those problems. Another mathematical practice that applies directly with the use of manipulatives is modeling with mathematics. Modeling with mathematics asks, or kind of like forces, the students to use visual and abstract representations of real world problems, of real world situation. So it's kind of like if there's a mathematical practice that hits manipulatives right on the spot, it's mathematical practice number 4, which is modeling with mathematics. Another one is using appropriate tools. So when they say using appropriate tools strategically, they're not only referring to the calculator as a tool for computation, they also refer to rulers, to balances, to cylinders. They talk about geosolids. So everything that the students employ in the classroom in deciphering or understanding a word problem, or understanding or analyzing a problem, is the application of this particular mathematical standard. And then lastly, mathematical practice 8. Look for and express regularity in repeated reasoning. Just like I said earlier, mathematics develops pattern recognition with our students. And pattern recognition is exactly what is stated here. It's regularly repeated reasoning. Now, you might see this particular visual very familiar to you. And if you're not, you need to be looking at your curriculum frameworks. Our curriculum frameworks has 10 domains. And then it's like, okay, well, if I use manipulatives, how many of these domains can I teach? Well, here's the answer. I highlighted all of the domains and the NRS levels which you can apply the use of manipulatives. And as you can see, you pretty much can teach all of the 10 domains using a limited set of manipulatives. If you have attended the College and Career Readiness Face-to-Face Workshop Part 2, I provided there a handout, a material that itemizes the different topics in each of these 10 domains, and I gave a suggestion for each topic as to what manipulative would be appropriate to use in each of those topics. If you have not attended the College and Career Readiness Workshops Part 2, it's your lucky day, because I have added that handout back into the list of handouts for this webinar. So if you go back to the registration page, or you go back to the IPDE website to view the archived webinar, then you will be able to download that particular handout. And I'm going to show that to you in a little bit. But what I did here is I took a snippet of your curriculum frameworks. One of the curriculum frameworks, and I picked just randomly measurement and data as one of them. And then look what I did. Look at some of the key words here that I have boxed in. What do you notice about these vocabulary words? What do you notice about these things? And I'm sure you're already going to say that they all are applicable to be taught with the use of manipulatives. Bar graphs. We can use the small boards or even the geoboard to show bar graphs. Scaled picture graphs. That's also can be illustrated with the use of a geoboard. Line plots. I use the number line when we're doing line plots in class. Not just the one that comes with your manipulatives kit that we provided. I also use a human line plot sometimes. I use a blue masking tape, that carpenter's tape, and I draw a big line across the front of the of the classroom, and sometimes I would ask the students to plot themselves or plot the data using their own bodies as points on the line plot. And they find that usually very exciting because it gets them up and about and moving around the room, and they're not just always sitting and listening to the teacher for an hour or 3 hours. Fractions, size lengths, line diagrams, all of these key objects. And this is just what? One, two, three, four. These are just five smaller, these are just five standards under the measurement data. And we can already explore so many ways to use various types of manipulatives to implement these standards. So again, just like I said, I just wanted to show you that manipulatives is really, really a very allows you the versatility to teach these concepts with ease, and students will understand them. So this is the one that I've been talking about. This is the handout that I shared during the face-to-face college and career readiness workshop. I created this handout, and I kind of created a legend there. If you see a G beside the topic name or an N beside the topic name, you can use a number line for it. If you see a 2N, that's a code for using a double number line, or a C, that's when you can use a colored counter. And then if you see an A, that's when you can use an algebra tile to teach that concept. So this handout is available to you through the Florida IPDA website. All you got to go is you can go in straight into the webinar section and go and find this particular webinar using manipulatives in the classroom. And then you can download it from the handout section. So this is just an enlarged view of what you can see there. So I listed all of the major topics under measurement and data under that domain. And then I identified in red what types of manipulatives can I use in teaching those concepts. And what you're going to find more often is that manipulatives that we selected and we've provided you during these face-to-face workshops are very versatile, that there's certain topics can be taught with multiple manipulatives in combination with each other. Or if you, let's say if you don't have a number line, you can still teach that concept using a geoboard. You know, so those are all very, very cool. All right, so I'm gonna go and demonstrate to you the geoboard app. Please remember that the students can download the geoboard app into their mobile devices, into their iPhone. Even if they have an Android phone, they can go and type and search for geoboard, and it's developed by the Math Learning Lab, and they can download it directly into their phone. And what I normally do is I would give students the assignment, like I'll ask all my students to download the geoboard app, and I'm going to give them an assignment or a homework to do on the geoboard or to perform on the geoboard, and then they take a picture of it and then they post it on their Instagram page or they post it on their Facebook page. Of course, I'm going to be looking for the hashtag. I will assign a particular hashtag for the students to tag their homework on, so I can really search them quickly through Twitter or let's say Instagram, and then I can check their work and I can see, oh, a lot of students really understood this concept. So let me just escape away from the PowerPoint and just show you that that tool. So what I'm showing you is right now, it's just like I said, I use geoboards a lot in my classroom in illustrating shapes. If I want to show, let's say, symmetry, well, you can use various colored shapes. You can drag and as if you can drag each corner or each part of the rubber band as if they're actual rubber bands and show, okay, so this is an example of symmetry. So students, so let's define what symmetry is. Okay, well, how about if I want to show them, let's say, I want to give, so if you don't want them anymore, you can just click on the trash can over here at the bottom corner. And then what if I wanted to show, let's say, similarity? Well, if I wanted to show, let's say, a similarity, let's say I want to show this scalene triangle, and I wanted to show them and give me an example of a similar similarly shaped triangle, and then I'm going to have students explore. So it's like, okay, well, show me what one looks like if you scaled it up. Is this example a similar shape? What do you think? How does the sides compare? How does the side lengths compare? And I ask the student, and I can continue asking the students, how do the angle lengths compare? Okay, if students have a difficulty visualizing that, you can always color. You know, what I like about this, you can color, you can visualize that. I also use this for fractions a lot. So let's say, for example, I wanted to show them, let's say I want to divide, let's just say that this, let me just delete that. Let's just say this is a whole bar of chocolate. And let's say I want to divide it into, or I want to multiply it by 1/2. Multiplying by 1/2 and dividing by 2 is the same. So students can either show me, okay, represent to me 1/2 of a bar. And then some of the students will show me that. And then what they'll discover is that's not the only way to show me what 1/2 of a bar looks like. It can only be also be shown, let's just say, let me color that up. It can also be shown like this. That's also 1/2 of a bar. So how 1/2 can be, so students can understand, oh, okay, well, 1/2 doesn't always look like this. It can also look like this. So they understand that 1/2 is not really just a number. 1/2 is actually related to the whole. And they develop that understanding of fractions. And then when they talk about more complex fractions, let's say 1/3, 3/4, 5/6, they really understand what's going on. And they're not really dependent on how it looks on the example that I just gave them, because they see it represented in a geoboard or in a manipulative. Now, the next slide that I'm going to show you is a number line app. The number line app, just like the geoboard, is also an app that they can download on their smartphone. And so if you download the app and you start the app, it will look like this. It's a very basic number line. You can increase the hash. A number line you can show, okay, well, you can give me different types of numbers. Let's say I want to add a 7, a positive 7. And then I want to add, and then let's say I want to add another number. Let's say I want to add a 5. Okay, and then it automatically shows the jump, and then it gives them the idea, okay, so it's a positive 7 plus a positive 5 equals 12. There's multiple things that you can do as well. You can do a reverse graph, so you can superimpose a graph, a line, a bar underneath. You can write on it, and you can write the word problem. Let's say 2 minus -3. I just apologize for my handwriting. You can write directly on the number line. So when I give the students the homework on their smartphone, not only should they illustrate the actual solution to the problem, they must also write it. They have to show their work to me. So, and they are allowed to do that because of the writing function. You can also erase parts of what you wrote. They say, oh, I made a mistake. That's supposed to be a positive 3. So I'll just do that. Students can also do that. And other things that you can do is you can remove the numbers. So that's one thing that I do, because I rarely work with numbers from 0 to 26. Sometimes I'm working off of negative numbers. And if you don't have and you want to work off with negative numbers, you can always highlight them, and then you can put your own numbers. You can either write it out or have the students write it for you. There's also a drag and drop box that you can use. You can add more boxes. You see this box that I just added? You can drag that box and let's say, okay, show me 1/2. Show me where 1/2 or 0.5 would be in the number line. So I would show them the numbers, and then they would point out and put a box on a particular section where I want the number 1/2 to show. You can modify your number line based on what you're actually teaching. So let me just remove the boxes that I put in there, okay? And then in here, you can really manipulate your numbers with such ease. You can do, if you want to show negative numbers, then you can just click check on the negative numbers. If you want no numbers and all of that. If you're teaching decimals, you can click on this and it will show you. It will ask you, do you want to change the numbering system? And then it will show you, look, my number line has now changed from 0 to positive 1.3 and from 0 to negative 1.3. And then I can manipulate and show problems in decimal form. So it allows me to go and explore the number line in such ease. Of course, you're going to have to do some practice. You don't want to do this the first time you're teaching the lesson. You must be already proficient with the use of the Numberline app before assigning students some work and before demonstrating the use of the Numberline app in solving problems. So that's one way of, that's just a little just tip for you. The next one I'm going to show you is the National Library of Virtual Mathematics, which again, just like I said, the website is right here on the slide itself. If you download the slide handouts, and then that I'm going to go into the website and just show you a little bit, a snippet of what that is. So the National Library of Virtual Mathematics, it shows the grade levels here, and you know our grade levels are already sorted according to our NRS level. So let's say I wanted to go into 9th and 12th grade algebra, and then you click on that section, and then it shows you all of the manipulatives that's available to you. Okay, one quick word of a caution. You have to have Java installed in your computer. So if you plan to use the National Library of Virtual Mathematics in your classroom, if you're not in a correctional facility, you must check with your tech guy to make sure that Java is up to date and installed on your computer. But if you're working at a correction and you plan to order that CD, you do not need Java anymore to be installed. Everything will run from that CD that you order from NLVM. So that's just one to show you that. And the grapher is one of the things that I like the most. So I'd like for you to explore that a little bit more and try out all of the manipulatives there. They have a ton. And it's developed by the Utah State University. They just devoted all of their resources in helping math teachers just like you and me. Just like I said, I want to show you that there are resources in the IPTE website that you can view, download, lesson plans that uses manipulatives, videos. We have created various grab and go videos, and the examples that I show here is a grab and go of the algebra tile. I didn't have time to show you how to use the algebra tile in this webinar, but you can always view that quick 2-3 minute video on how to use the algebra tile web app or the physical algebra tile in your classroom. CCRS, if you wanted to get the templates that we created, like the laminated geoboard, the laminated number line, those templates, not only can you get them from Google, you can also go into the CCRS Part 1 and download the zip files so you can get all of those templates, and then you can print them on a cardstock, laminate them, and then color them, just like Miss Jode says. You can color them and use them in your classroom. So that's available to you as well. And then just the final words for you to remember. One of the things that I really stress out is manipulatives is the means and not the end. It's not the outcome of your instruction. Manipulatives is to help your students understand the beginning stages of a particular math concept. It's not the end result. So I want you to just remember that for a little bit when you're using manipulatives. When you're teaching and using the manipulatives in your classroom, ask your students, or always get the habit of having students to show their work side by side with their manipulatives, because eventually you want to move your students from that concrete to more representational and to more abstract use of mathematics. Allow your student to explore and experiment, just like you said. If it's taking a lot of your time teaching the use of the manipulatives, you don't have to. Just give them the manipulatives, tell them, okay, this is the manipulatives I want you to use. I want you to figure it out. I want you to explore. I'm not going to show you anything. I'm not going to model anything. Show them out. What you're going to find out, your students is going to discover a lot of novelty techniques and ways that they can solve a particular problem, things that you may not have thought of. Manipulatives are, just like I said, could be household items or objects. You do not have to spend anything in order to implement this particular strategy in your classroom. The success of the students does not depend on the manipulative type, or whether you bought it online, or whether you just created it, or you just something that you brought from home. It's the quality of the interaction between you and your students and how you're using that manipulative for the student to understand the concept. That's really the most powerful part in the use of manipulatives. Lessons using manipulatives must be carefully planned. So that's another thing. You cannot just say, oh, let me whip this out and let me use this. No, you have to think about it. You have to think it through. You have to think about what questions your students may have, because you don't want to be caught off guard with using the manipulatives. That's why I always tell my students, sometimes I haven't thought about a particular strategy that students discovered. So really, I applaud the students who come up with more efficient strategies in solving problems than the ones that I thought of. And then lastly, the way you visualize your manipulatives is not always going to be the same as your students see them. So you always have to think aloud. You always have to explain every step of the way, and you do not assume that every student understands how to manipulate these manipulatives. So you have to model, you have to explain, you have to think out loud so that they truly understand every step of the way when you're demonstrating manipulatives with your students. So with that said, I think we have a minute to just talk about some of your questions. I'm going to look at some of your comments here. Yes, Miss Day talked about using Clorox wipe containers as cylinder faces. That's excellent. Again, saving the planet. And a lot of the comments here are really, really useful. And if I am not able to answer your question, we're gonna download the questions from these archives, and then I'm gonna answer your question through email using the Florida IPNE email. With that said, I wanted to say thank you for spending a good amount of your afternoon just learning a little bit more about manipulatives and just reviewing how to use the manipulatives in your class, or probably exploring other things that are out there. I would like to know what you think about this webinar. Feel free to go into the SurveyMonkey link. It's also in your handouts pages. If you can't get to it right now at this moment, you can complete it at a later time. I really wanted to know what you think. You can also scan the QR code. It will lead you directly to the SurveyMonkey page. I'd like to know how you like and how we can further improve these webinars for you. Again, just like I said, IPNE is webinar by educators for educators. So however we can make this webinar more useful and more powerful, relevant to your needs, we will do it for you. So please try to complete that evaluation on SurveyMonkey. With that said, thank you very much for the answers that you shared with me, and I'll see you again for our next webinar.
Ron?
Yes.
I just wanted to point out that many of our participants today are participating via groups.
Okay.
So if you would just send me the names of the individuals, a few of you have, and I've captured those names, but just send them to me in an email, and then we'll make sure that credit for those folks attending this webinar will be in their portal accounts.
Great job. Yes, we do wanted you do wanted to have it in archived in your portal account so that it's recorded in your personal activity, so that you can always use that in order to renew your certification at your individual school districts or colleges or institution. So again, just like I said, thank you for that reminder. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. It's rcruz@floridaitday.org. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's webinar. And until our next webinar, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.